every game is make or break, win or go home, every single game moving forward.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Savannah Sellers, filling in for Yasmin Vasugian. Today on the show, as the World Cup enters the knockout round, who's got the toughest path to victory? Plus, President Trump says his team is still headed to Doha to hash out how the Iran-U.S. deal will be implemented, despite clashes in the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend. But could a new shipping route in the Strait change the game? Up first, though, it's a mixed bag for President Trump at the Supreme Court today. On the one hand, the justices expanded the president's power to hire and fire at independent agencies, allowing President Trump to get rid of Federal Trade Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter. But the court rejected his attempt to fire Federal Reserve Board member Lisa Cook, saying that the central bank ought to be protected from political interference. And the justices also upheld protections for mail-in voting, one of the president's favorite targets. So what's going on here? To break this all down, I'm going to bring in NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett. Hi, Laura.
The moment we've all been waiting for.
We got some big ones in this final week of the Supreme Court's term. Let's talk first about, I use the term mixed bag, and we're kind of seeing it be called that, because on the one hand, you can fire somebody, but you can't fire the other. Walk us through what this decision means, what the difference and distinction is between these two that made that be what the justices decided.
So the president has been on something of a firing spree in this second term. The issue is that there are protections for people who are on these quasi-independent federal agencies in the law. The protections differ depending on what office you occupy. So in the case of Slaughter, who's on the Federal Trade Commission, it says you're not supposed to fire her for just any old reason. She actually has to have done something wrong. And today, for the first time, the Supreme Court says, actually, the president can basically fire someone like Slaughter at will. Essentially, if he couldn't do that, that would violate the separation of powers. Congress shouldn't be able to set up these sort of roadblocks of who the president wants to be able to have in these sort of lower tier agencies, and therefore he can fire someone like Slaughter. However, Supreme Court thinks the Fed is different. The Fed is special. The Fed is messing with markets and interest rates and all of these things that are really supposed to be without the taint of politics. The president is not supposed to be able to put his thumb on the scale when it comes to someone like Lisa Cook, who's on the Fed, because essentially, like, it would just be too tempting to want to mess with the markets. And so essentially, the Fed is on an island, and everybody else, all these other, like, dozens of other federal agencies are in a different bucket. And so that's why I think people are calling it a mixed bag. I think if it's like headlined, if we're thinking like in big terms, this is a vast expansion of presidential powers.
Let's talk also now about the mail-in voting decision that we got, essentially protecting part of that process that the Republican National Committee had challenged.
This is a really big deal.
Yes.
30 states vote like this or have some sort of permutation of a voting system like this where the ballots that come in after Election Day, so they are received after Election Day, but they are postmarked on or before Election Day. And the question is, what do you do with those? And as more and more states go to mail-in ballot or some version of it, it becomes increasingly important. And so they were looking at one Mississippi law, trying to figure out, like, how does this jive with federal election laws? Can Mississippi do this? And the court says yes. The conservative majority, despite the fact that the Republicans brought this suit, and Donald Trump, we know his feelings on mail-in ballot, the conservative majority said yes, you can continue to receive ballots after Election Day and have those still be counted. And so this is a huge decision going into midterms and going in, obviously, to the next presidential election. Now, that doesn't mean the Supreme Court's going to line up on the side of the DNC in every case from now until whenever. I'm not suggesting that whatsoever. But this is a big deal, and I'm not sure that everyone could have predicted it come out this way.
We've heard from the president also on this, essentially now pushing Congress to do something about it, rather than coming at this from the Supreme Court angle, pushing something on the Hill called the SAVE Act. So legally, what could happen with mail-in voting? What could Congress do with mail-in voting?
But this is, again, where you get into the issue of, like, what are they going to have the political capital to get passed that's going to have enough teeth by the time the next election rolls around? And then it will inevitably get challenged. And so, like, will that get resolved before the next election, right? Because even if Congress was to pass something that was more restrictive, someone's going to sue over it. It's not going to be clean, so it's just going to end up back in court. And so I think the upshot, more likely from a practical standpoint, is what the Supreme Court did today is what's going to be on the books for a long time to come, which, if passed as any precedent, is going to help Democrats in elections unless Republicans decide to change their tune and start embracing mail-in voting.
Talk to me also about what we heard on E. Jean Carroll today.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. So the president has been trying to fight the verdict in the E. Jean Carroll case for years now. Remember, she's the writer. She sued the president. It was a civil case, but she sued him, accusing him of defamation and sexual abuse. It had to do with her allegations of him assaulting her in Bergdorf Goodman years and years ago. He always denied it. He always said it never happened. But a jury agreed with E. Jean Carroll and awarded her a pretty sizable chunk of change, right? $5 million. The president has been appealing this basically since that verdict came down. His last stop was the U.S. Supreme Court. And today, the Supreme Court said, we are not touching this case with a 10-foot pole. But we don't know why they didn't want to get into it. Now, typically, they're not going to get into a state jury verdict.
Right.
Like, they're not going to go down and change a jury verdict. That would be rare. And if they had decided to take it up, that probably would have been more news, because then it would be like, okay, on what grounds? Why do they think something happened here that is worthy of the U.S. Supreme Court intervening? But he's obviously not happy about it. He's put out a statement sort of not addressing the merits of what the Supreme Court did, but talking about witch hunts and other things. So he's clearly disappointed in the result.
So if we sort of tally up everything that we learned today, and keeping in mind, we're coming towards the end of the term here. Tomorrow, now the last day, so we will be getting something big tomorrow.
We now finally have an answer of when are we going to find out what they're doing with birthright citizenship.
Exactly. Jinx. That's coming tomorrow. But today, though, if we just sort of like take this whole grouping that we got, E. Jean Carroll has basically said, we're not helping you out on that one. We're not doing that one. Mail-in voting, the president did not get what he wanted, and he's made that clear. Did not get what he wanted when it comes to Lisa Cook, but what he got on the slaughter decision was a pretty, as you put it, broad expansion of his powers to sort of just say the Fed's special, but kind of do whatever else you want with any of these other agencies. What's your kind of headline when you walk away from today with those 4 pieces of news?
That this is a court that is treading carefully to try to make sure that they still serve as a check on presidential power and authority, but is a court that is deferential in traditionally conservative, principle-minded ways, in a way that is not unique to Donald Trump. So what they did as it relates to his ability to fire Slaughter, I don't think is something that they wouldn't have done for any other president. It's that no other president had ever tried, right? So he keeps sort of pushing the envelope as it relates to flexing executive power, which means just an expansion of executive power writ large for every other president that comes. But because it's Trump and because he's firing people via social media and the way that he's doing it, it's something unique to him. But it's also something that conservatives have wanted to do for a long time, right? The centuries-old case that they've overruled today in Slaughter is a case that conservatives have been trying to get rid of for a long time. It's just now that it's more teed up for them in a really clear way because Trump is the only one who's been able to do it.
Laura, this was so great. You know, it's so great. It's almost like you should have a podcast about... Oh, wait.
So funny you would say that.
You do. You have a specific Here's the Scoop Supreme Court Edition podcast. You can watch it on YouTube. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. You unpack a lot of what we just talked about in even more depth.
We go deep on all the things having to do with hiring and firing and birthright and geofencing. We didn't even talk about geofencing.
And that was also today.
Huge decision. And we cover it in the podcast.
Okay, go listen to that. This is one of those things, like, don't you just want to be smarter about the Supreme Court, everybody? Like, just go listen, and you'll have fun doing it, and you're going to learn a lot. Laura, thank you so much.
So much fun, as always. Thank you, Savannah.
And we're back with Here's the Scoop from NBC News. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before. The U.S. and Iran exchanged strikes over the weekend. And despite that memorandum of understanding that officials signed earlier this month, the fighting kicked back up over disagreements around who controls traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran is trying to use control of the strait as leverage in these ongoing talks with the U.S., but the United Nations has been working with neighboring countries on alternate routes without Iranian oversight. So how much could these disagreements over control of the strait threaten a deal? Joining me now outside in East Jerusalem is NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons. Hi, Keir.
Hey, Savannah.
So it feels like we've been covering just similar developments in this war week after week since a ceasefire was first announced. That was all the way back in April. And here we are. It just feels like we keep hearing the same type of story. Can you put this latest back and forth in perspective? Like, how much of a setback is this potentially to a peace deal?
I think one of the ways that I have thought about this is that the war was indecisive, effectively. Neither side won, is one way of putting it. Not everyone would agree with that, but just go with me. But now what you're seeing is the two sides battling over who will win the peace. And it's very familiar, actually, in warfare that to win the peace is part of the whole history of two sides fighting with each other, and that's what you're seeing here. So what we saw over the weekend was the Iranians fire on a ship in the Strait of Hormuz that was not traveling through Iranian waters as it tried to get through the strait. And the Iranians don't like that because they want to say that they are in control of the strait. And then you saw this conflict between the US and Iran over that question, really. And the Iranians say that the memorandum of understanding that was signed around 2 weeks ago now or so, that memorandum of understanding gives them that sovereignty, gives them that power to reopen the strait because it's theirs. It isn't theirs, it's Omani as well, and it's actually international waters too. But that's what they're saying. And again, I lay all that out to sort of try to describe how the US and Iran are still fighting over the same things, even if they're not fighting in the way they were.
So, Keir, you mentioned where this ship was trying to pass through in the strait and this recent flare-up. And this was related to this route through the Strait of Hormuz that the UN was helping establish, like I mentioned, near Oman. Walk us through that route, why that could be causing tension with Iran, what it's meant to do.
Well, quite simply, it's causing tension with Iran because the Iranians would like to charge ships for passing through the strait, whether you call it a toll or a fee or insurance or whatever you want to say. That's what the Iranians would like. They also would like to maintain some kind of leverage over the strait because that's turned out to be quite useful to them politically. So that's the reason. There's another piece to this too, which is a little underreported, which is that there was a meeting between Gulf states that with the Omanis that set out the framework for reopening the strait. And again, the Iranians didn't like that. It's not just a battle this between the US and Iran over the Strait of Hormuz. It's also a battle between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and Oman and Bahrain. All of these states that have an interest in shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. There's a battle of wills there too, and you're seeing that in the other files, as we call them, the other aspects of the deal between the US and Iran and what Iran is trying to do, what the US is trying to stop Iran from doing.
So, Keir, despite this flare-up, as you've mentioned, President Trump says these negotiations are moving forward. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner are supposed to be headed to Doha to continue those conversations tomorrow. We don't have any confirmation or sort of reaction from Tehran on that yet, but that's at least where we know the United States delegation stands. But there are still so many sticking points, right? So we've just talked through the Strait of Hormuz, but there's also what does happen with nuclear inspections within Iran. Walk me through what your sources are telling you about these sticking points.
Yeah, I mean, there are real sticking points on almost every aspect of all of this. And, strangely, the nuclear aspect, which is, of course, the primary reason that President Trump launched the war, is being talked about the least in the past few days. I think it's interesting to look closely at what Iranian officials are saying and to understand from that what they are hoping for, even planning for. So when it comes to Lebanon, for example, the Iranian officials, Aragchi, for example, the foreign minister, they are talking about that the memorandum of understanding commits Israel to leave southern Lebanon. Now, people will know that Israel wasn't involved in the negotiations that led to the MOU, and there's another separate deal, confusingly, between Israel and Lebanon that frames things in a different way. But certainly, it's true to say that I don't think that's the way that the US or even Israel would view the deal they did with Iran, that it compels Israel to leave. Another aspect of the Iranian messaging, what Iranian officials are saying, the foreign minister again, is, but it's not just him, they are talking about that this memorandum of understanding, this deal with the Trump administration, dictates that the US should withdraw from the region. Now, of course, there's no way that the US is going to do that, not anytime soon, and the Trump administration wouldn't think that that's what they've signed up to. So, I mean, I think the whole thing about this memorandum of understanding, this agreement, which has led to a partial ceasefire, let's call it that, a fairly decent ceasefire, is that it's vague, it's flexible, and that's kind of what's allowed the deal to be done, but it's now what's causing the challenges.
Keir Simmons from Jerusalem for us. Thank you so much, Keir.
You bet.
The World Cup has entered a new phase. After 72 exhilarating matches at the group stage, we are now in the knockout round. For the remaining 32 teams, that means go big or go home mode. So it's a good moment to take stock. Who have been the surprising standouts? Which Cinderella stories should we be looking out for? And who has the toughest road ahead to that FIFA World Cup trophy? I'm now joined by NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch. He is in Miami for us. You're like not a fan or anything, right, Jesse?
No, I've not been watching soccer every day, around the clock, not getting sleep. None of that has been happening. Absolutely not.
Okay, so you are a fan. And can I just say, I feel like the fans are the best part of this. Like, I fell in love with the Tartan Army. I am obsessed with watching people discover ranch dressing while they're visiting and being so excited about it. Like, it's just so great. Tell me the vibes down in Miami, how it's been since you're one of the host cities.
Yeah, and you talked about the ranch dressing aspect of this. You don't just have cultures colliding with each other in the best ways, but it's happening here, so it's that much funnier and exciting for us. And the other thing is, you talked about the Tartan Army from Scotland. They are possibly the favorite fan group of the tournament. You've also got Norway with the Viking row on the subway. I don't know if you've seen them on the trains in New York at all, but there are all kinds of funny moments, but the Scots are also a group that have not been to the World Cup in quite some time. So the fact that you have a bigger tournament, more teams involved, you're getting a chance to see more of these cultures on display too, which just makes it that much better. You talk about how things have been here in Miami. People have been lining up hours before kickoff outside of the Fan Fest to get inside. So people are that excited about standing outside in Miami summer heat to watch their team. So I think that just speaks to it. And we were lucky enough to have the Tartan Army down here, bagpipes and salsa music, kilts in the humidity. I mean, what else can you say? And traffic cones all over town.
Yeah, Google the traffic cones if you don't know what that means.
You must.
It's hilarious. Jesse, recap the last couple of weeks for us. Anything super surprising as we head into this next round?
I think the biggest surprise that has made its way out of the group stage is Cape Verde. This is an island nation off the coast of Africa, population of around 500,000 people. They tie Spain in their first ever World Cup match. And to put that in perspective, Spain is like the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Patriots. So they went up against this team that had never been to the World Cup before. Their population, again, about 500,000 people. And I'm just going to Instagram right now because I want to see where he's at right now. The star of that team was their goalkeeper. He goes by Vozinha, and he made 7 saves against Spain. Right now, he has 17.3 million Instagram followers. And that underdog story is not done yet, Savannah, because they're playing here in the Miami area on Friday against Argentina. And if you can get past Lionel Messi, then I don't know what can stop you.
let's talk through what happens from here. Like, who's got the steepest competition, the toughest path, maybe who's got the easiest?
So we're now in what's known as the knockout stage. So it starts with the round of 32, then it's going to be a round of 16, then you'll have quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the final, and the two teams that lose in the semis will play in a third place match. Okay, so that's the format. Every game is make or break, win or go home, every single game moving forward. So we were just debating this over here. I think that it looks like Argentina, and see, again, that's just completely, in a way, discounting Cape Verde as we go into the knockout round. I'm going to say if they get past Cape Verde, because this Cinderella story just doesn't seem to want to go away. It looks like Argentina would have one of, you could argue, the easier paths to get to the final. Argentina, the reigning champs, seem to be getting, maybe a little luck on their side. Let's look at the bracket here. Okay, so I'm looking right now, right out of the gate. France plays Sweden. Germany plays Paraguay. So if Germany and France get out of the round of 32, then they have to play each other. Germany versus France seems like a pretty daunting round of 16.
Okay, last quick question for you, Jesse. Team USA, we got to talk. I mean, it went pretty well. I know we lost the last one, but that one didn't really count.
Pretty good.
We won the group. There we go. So walk us through what we're going to see when they are matched up against Bosnia.
Yeah, and so a couple things to keep in mind, right? We talked about that. They look great. Really strong opening, back-to-back wins. We're looking to see if they could have won their third match against Turkey, won out the group undefeated. But for people who are worried now, let's take a deep breath. It is early going, and there was a lot of reason for the U.S. squad to not necessarily put forward its strongest starting 11 for that game. And here's why. You had Christian Pulisic. He got injured early in the tournament, so they weren't going to have him playing the full game. Now, group stage is over, so you can now put forth your best squad. There are no limitations theoretically. Maybe Pulisic, we don't know if he's still dealing with that injury in any way, but certainly now, again, every game matters, win or go home. If the U.S. beats Bosnia and Herzegovina, they're either going to play Belgium or Senegal based on how that game goes between those two teams. So that's your next opponent. That's round of 16. Of course, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. Don't want to put the soccer cleat before the soccer ball. I don't know, mixing metaphors here, but basically that's what we're looking at in the immediate future. But, let's see how far they can go.
Jesse Kirsch, that was fun. I'm pumped. I'm pumped about sports. That's so awesome. Jesse, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for us here at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Savannah Sellers, filling in for Yasmin Vasugian. We will be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. If you like what you heard and you saw, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.